Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Josh Minthorn. I'm a director here at Excelino, and I'm joined here with one of my team members, Jade Thorpe, and he'll introduce himself in just a moment. We are here to talk to you today about the customer journey and how you actually build a customer-centric journey so that if you have different channels in which you interact with customers, you can have a very cohesive experience around that. And particularly, how do you do that with Red Hat technology and some of the important things that are there? We at Excelino are a premier Red Hat partner, so we've worked very closely with the Red Hat technologies and with customers to build solutions around this. And everybody's is a little bit different. What we do want to talk about today is why this is important. So I'm going to have Jade introduce himself, and then we will go ahead and start to dive right in to what we're going to be talking about today. Jade?
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jade Thorpe, and I am a solutions consultant here with Excelino. I've been in a pretty long technology career that spanned about over 20 years. Most of that time I spent in the aerospace industry, working with different airlines and various airline carriers. And through that, had a lot of opportunity to see a lot of different technologies and see how things have changed over the years in terms of how these different companies have utilized technology and leverage different emerging technologies and merging those with a lot of legacy systems as well. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to our discussion today.
Perfect. Thank you, Jade. As we go through today, we're going to talk for about 30-35 minutes, give or take, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A. So as we're going through this, if you have questions, definitely feel free to put those into the chat, and we will read those and get those answered towards the end here today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So Jade, as you and I were talking about this and putting this all together, we were talking about our collective experiences in working with customers, especially what you've done around aerospace, and you have more experience there than I do, but I've seen it across a lot of other industries. And what we see is that you have different parts of an organization looking at customer information, trying to maybe sell them different things, and they operate in silos, even though for the one company, it's a single cohesive customer. And it's always been, as we were talking, always been very interesting how we've seen why are they treated individually as opposed to really being looked at from a holistic standpoint. And that's really what brought us here today, about talking about this omni-channel and how do you bring it all together so that you can actually leverage the strengths of the data and everything across all of those channels, all at the end of the day about really having a very, very good customer experience. And I think with the current situation at hand, obviously things are different, we're adjusting, and I think that there's going to be an indelible mark that's left, and we're never going to go back to the way that we were. We're going to go back to some form of that, but we're also going to change in terms of shopping habits, how we work, how we interact with things. And so because now more than ever, we're shopping online, how you get the eyes and get people's attention is critically important. I think even more now than before. Yet there are still brick and mortar stores. Those I don't think are ever going to go away. They're always going to be there for some industries and part of different companies' strategies in terms of how they reach customers. And so what I wanted to really talk about is with you, Jade, is start to really dig into this and how do companies figure out, okay, we're talking about all these different silos, but now how do we bring this together? So want to see, kind of start with you, and I know, again, kind of talking through this, there's a lot of fundamental things that you've seen, and so I want to turn it over to you to get your insight into this because you have a very unique, I think, very particular set of experiences that I think it really, really applies around this omni-channel experience.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, definitely we are in a time right now where our strengths and our weaknesses in terms of how we communicate and see our customers are brought to light. Um, Especially, as we're transitioning, technologies are evolving, and in a lot of cases, our business practices haven't evolved as fast as the technology has. So now we have the opportunity uh, to see our customers in a different way. I mean, there was not too many years ago, everyone, would refer to customers that they get from the internet as, oh, these are one of our web customers. And they look at that web business as a different audience or a different set of customers than those that show up, for example, in their physical location. But what we are finding now is that shoppers are changing, customers, clients are changing the way that they want to be treated and want to be interacted with. They no longer make a distinction between online and physical. They want to be able to do everything they can do in the store, besides like trying on clothes, for example. They want to be able to do that online. They want to have access to the same products, the same pricing, the same communication. Yet at the same time, when they come into the store after they've shopped online, they want to continue that experience. They want to be able um, to know that, hey, if I looked online and I saw something, it said it was in the store, when I get to the store, it's there, and then I can speak to one of the customer service agents at the store about that product. Again, continuing that conversation so that you're not starting from square one again when you go to transition from online to physical or from physical to online. You can just keep things rolling. Yep. So one of the things that we talked about is these patterns. How to do businesses and organizations treat their customers. If you remember, those who remember the old Sears catalog, with this massive catalog with all their products in it, and it was shipped out to every single family in the United States, got the same catalog. So if you were male, female, old, young, lived in the city or in the suburbs or in a rural area, you all got the same catalog, and it had all the products in there. That was the way commerce was done back then. You wanted to reach as many people as you can with as many products as you can, and that was very expensive because that big thick catalog was very expensive to produce, and you just shipped it to everybody. The reason why that was done back then is because they didn't know who the customer was really. They didn't have much information about them. So the only thing they could do is just to ship this thing out. Now, today we look back in retrospect and we see that that whole concept that really made Sears Roebuck a mega giant in the industry didn't work for them once we moved into the internet age. Once we started getting users that wanted to shop online, Sears didn't adjust to that, and then their big catalog just fell to the side. This is what I would call an anti-pattern. It worked in the 90s and the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It worked, but today that pattern does not work. We're treating all customers the same in that pattern, where we don't really know much about our customer. All we can look at is what they did. So we can look at their order history, but we don't really have enough information to really know who they are and make any type of decisions or anticipation about what we think they're going to do. But as time goes on, there has been a lot of retailers, if we're going to stick with the retail industry, that have changed. Sears and Nordstrom, were not on the same level back in the 80s and 90s, but they had the same type of business pattern. They had these physical locations, these anchor stores within malls and retail properties. And the difference is that Nordstrom is still a prominent player, Sears not so much. And the reason is because Nordstrom found a way to change the way that they did business, the way that they interacted with their customers. They were able to create an experience and leverage the online technologies to create an experience for their customers where they felt like they were known, they felt like they were had a consistent experience, whether they're shopping online or whether they're shopping in a physical location. And Nordstrom has really leveraged this and done a lot of different things. You know, they have your online experience, you have, you know, different services within the store that you can go to. Some services that that kind of say, okay, why would I go into the store? Because there are certain things that you can do, like VIP shopping suites, concierge services, you know, personal, pretty much shopping consultants that can shop with you when you're in the store. And if you're not, you know, that's not convenient for you or you're not able to do that, then you can also have a great experience while you are shopping online.
What's interesting that you say there, Jay, is that so with Nordstrom, it's not, okay, customers are shopping online or from a catalog or in store, but also how they've looked at it and said, what are some of there's the products, right? There's women's clothing, men's clothing, there's shoes, there's household goods, there's beauty and things like that. In fact, I don't know if they're still there. I haven't been in Nordstrom in a while, but there used to be little Tesla stores inside of some of the Nordstroms. Is that they were also, again, besides the products, they were created services within their stores to be able to help different types of customers in terms of the level of service that they wanted. And I think that's important too as we talk through this, because again, it's not just how do you make it so that somebody was online and they walk into a store and now somebody can look up and see what this person was looking at, but it's and see what products they maybe are interested in and can offer suggestions. But it's also about this other services that could be a part of that, because those are communicated a little bit differently, sold a little bit differently, potentially different demographics and things like that. And so when we think about that, you know, I think really what we're doing there is we're having a conversation with a customer. And I don't mean a conversation like we're having here. What I mean is there's communication between the whoever's selling the goods, whether it's a product or a service, and the customer. And there's a couple of different ways to communicate that, and that's going to vary per industry and everything like that. But I think one thing is clear, Jade, is that there needs to be consistency. What have you seen around that? Why is that so important when we think about omnichannel?
Well, what I like to do is call it the long conversation. You know, it's not just one transaction that you do, but it's a whole set of transactions. It's a whole set of communications, and it's being able to receive data from those transactions and communications, and then make decisions based upon that. So say, for example, you know, in this particular slide, you see we have all of these different ways that we interact with the customer. All right, from social media, email, mobile, website, print ads, digital ads. We know now in the omni-channel pattern, we know what we sent to that customer. We can look at what they view on the website, what they end up purchasing, what are their interests, and then we can tailor what we send to that person, perhaps in email marketing, what we send to them in print, you know, mailers. So there's different things that we can do now to cater their experience to that person, because now we know more about them. But in order for that to work, you have to have this conversation, you know, to provide that consistent environment or that consistent experience. You have to have this long conversation where you are exchanging data with that particular customer, and in creating this view of the customer where you know them better than you knew them before. And then you're able to help to kind of decide what they see, where you spend in terms of your advertising. You know, we talked about having things in the store. Well, if you know who your customers are and you know what customers show up in your store, you can start to look at the displays that you have in the store, the service that you provide in the store, because you know the types of customers that are coming into your physical location, and you can cater to those customers. You know, some of the things that Nordstrom, you know, once they get this data and they collect this, because probably many of you right now today are collecting data about your customers, right? And you know, one of the things that data is used for is to make reports, right? So we're good at that, you know, getting data. We give a report on, you know, well, how many customers bought this, and what is our how's our sales increasing in this particular area, or how many customers are flying to this area or that area, and how price sensitive they are. You know, we're good at building reports. What a lot of folks are not good at yet is taking all that information and building it into insight. You know, meaning how can we get a better view of our customers so that we can do things differently to better serve them. And when we do that, we're moving the data more from a historical view to a more real-time view. Okay. Now, once we get that and we can see all this data about the customer, it allows us now to kind of do some analysis. And one of the things I thought was pretty neat for Nordstrom is that they know, based on the way that their customers interact on their different locations, that if they can get them to interact on any one of their channels one time, it's a 1x impact in terms of buying. But if they can just get them to go to 2 different channels, then that doesn't just double, it goes like to 3 or 4 times buying impact, right? And then it just goes up with triple, and then a home run. If they get a home run and they get a person to visit on 4 different channels, then that's, you know, 13 to 11 times more of a spend than that way had if they were just in one or 2 channels. So they know that based on the information, and then therefore they can start to market. They can start to, you know, maybe it decides where they open a store based on where their customers are, that types of things, or what type of store, whether it's a Nordstrom Rack or a Nordstrom, you know, main store. So, but they make those decisions based on the insight that they get from the data. It's not just reports anymore. Now they can actually make real-time decisions based on the data.
And real quick, Jade, I think what's interesting here is that that single, double, triple, and home run piece, because it's not something that's linear, right? So they don't just double their trips and their spend when they go from 1 to 2, or triple it when they go from 1 to 3, or what have you. It's actually an exponential amount of growth when the more channels that somebody is going through. What that tells me, and we've seen this working with customers, is that the more channels that somebody starts to shop through, they not only start to shop more often, they start to spend more each time they are shopping. And that is a trend that we not only see with this, but also it aligns with a trend when it comes to customer loyalty. Everybody knows the first sale is the most expensive, but there's reasons why customer loyalty programs exist. They have found that when a customer is loyal, they begin to shop more often, and every time they shop, they start to spend more each time.
Yeah.
And this is very indicative of that here as well, just because there's different channels. So I think it's very interesting of how those things align. And I think it's fair to say, maybe a little anecdotally, but that when you have more channels and customers are shopping in those channels, you are building customer engagement, and then you're building that customer loyalty as well.
Yeah, you're building a trust relationship, you know, and the more you interact with the customer, that experience is good, and they are getting what they want, then you build that trust relationship, and then that's loyalty. They'll come back every single time. We see this a lot in the airline industry. Like here in Dallas area, we have American Airlines and Southwest Airlines, and some people are just so loyal to one or the other that they'll not fly the other one. Even though both of them, they might have better pricing, but they'll stick with one because that's their airline. That's my airline. That's the one I'm going to fly. So, but that's based on a long, interaction with that particular customer. Now, in the case of omnichannel, we build that relationship through our communications and through our interactions with that client. So when you are looking at omnichannel and how you implement it, the first thing we have to do is have a design. We have to have a blueprint of how we're going to address this and where we're going, what do we need to do, and assess what are the things that we already have. In terms, like I said, we're already in a lot of ways collecting a lot of data to build reports and to do things. A lot of different areas, like whether it's the financial area, whether it's inventory, just sales, all those things. We're already collecting a lot of that data. But what we need to do is identify and break down all the things that are necessary for us to have these consistent conversations. We need to look at and analyze how we're currently communicating with the customer and how we're sharing that data about those communications across all the different channels that we're communicating with them on. Is the marketing department communicating with our planning and in our web departments and stuff like that? So is everybody have access to the same information? Are they readily sharing it? We want to focus on unifying all of those different channels so that they're all seeing the customer in the same way, and they're all able to consistently communicate with that customer in the same way. And in order to do that, to put all this together, we have to create this blueprint that really identifies all of our needs, identifies what our existing infrastructure is, and then prioritizes all that together into a set of requirements that then we can then begin to build this infrastructure where we can execute this omni-channel strategy. So there's a lot of components to the blueprint, and it's how we manage our data, our security access, traffic management. You probably see a lot of these or have a lot of challenges within these areas already and initiatives within these areas already. For example, in DevOps, there's been a lot of automation and a lot of energy put into smoothing out your development and ops procedures and processes. You probably all do this in IT infrastructure management as well, where you put automation and things in place to make that better. What we see now is we want to take those same types of automations, same types of process improvements, and move them along to how we manage data and how we move data. And so you have to have that good infrastructure on the bottom, the good technology infrastructure on the bottom. And we're going to talk about things like, containerization and container platform management platforms, how we store and use our data. But overall, what we want to do is we want to kind of move that data back from just being stored in some, data lake where everything is kind of sitting there to more like a data streaming strategy, where then that data can be utilized in a more real-time fashion. That then allows us to make real-time decisions and more timely decisions about how we communicate and interact with that customer. Of course, you also have to add to that, your staffing and training as well. As you start to, different areas are starting to look at things differently, you're going to have to add some training into how they are treating their data and moving their data. But like I said, there's probably some amount of skill sets within other parts of your organization that already have experience with some of these tools. So some of the common things we have are external applications, like third-party applications that we have to exchange data with. We have our own APIs. We have microservices. I did some work earlier this year with a bank, and they had, I think it was 156 different microservices, and it's just a lot of movement, a lot of moving parts, and we ended up migrating them to a orchestration system that allowed them to then manage all those different microservices in a same way. You're going to have the same thing with data as well, because you're going to have microservices that are going to be brokering data back and forth between different services. And then on top of that, you've got business logic, security and authentication. You've got all these parts and pieces to get all this stuff to work together. We're pulling all these channels which have evolved over time to be their own separate thing, but we need a way to kind of glue that all together and bridge from one service to the next. And we have some tools that can help you do that, and how to integrate those things and bring them together. So one of the tools as we're connecting things together is Red Hat Fuse. And what Fuse allows you to do is to create a bridge for different applications to communicate with each other. When a lot of times when especially third-party applications, they kind of build their application, and sometimes they have integrations with other systems that they know that they're going to integrate with, but a lot of times you'll get systems that you've had for a while. They don't talk to anything else, and that's probably why they're siloed, is because there's not an easy way to communicate and share that data with other systems. A product like Red Hat Fuse will allow you to provide that bridge, to speak one language to one application and then another language to another application, and then bring those two things together so that they can communicate. The other thing we have is ways to expose different services in a secure manner, so that your end users can utilize them. And so we have an API management, which allows us to securely expose certain services and keep other services hidden tightly behind our firewalls. Then the other thing, this is very important, this is what I alluded to earlier with our banking customer, is that they had all these microservices. They were using VMs to launch that. We were able to get them to move to OpenShift and container management platform, and then that allowed them to kind of smooth out their development and operations processes. They were able to improve their uptime and reliability, and then not only that, with the different tools for monitoring, they now had a holistic view of how their systems and all their microservices were performing at any given time. And then again, there is automation management. So we need to be able to automatically make decisions based on information that we perceive within our systems. So all of these things, as we bring them together, will help us to achieve these conversations that we want. Because it's really all about bringing data together, getting systems that may or may not already talk to each other, but getting them all to share and talk to each other in a way that we can have a complete view of our customer, and we have the data necessary to help us to make decisions on how to best serve that customer. All right, so out of that we get our reduced development times. so that allows us to, if we follow the correct patterns and we're using the containers correctly, and we've got our continuous integration, continuous development pipelines, we can make our development a little bit smoother, because we're going to have to do that, because our development process cannot be a barrier to us implementing the services and processes we need to make this omni-channel strategy work. So it's not just about how do we get omni-channel to work, it's about all the steps that we have to take to get there. We have to have that good base at the bottom of your good foundation to make the rest of this work. We know we're going to have to change the way we do things. We're going to have to change the way that our services and our products are structured. And in order to do that, we have to have a good development process that's reliable, that's fast, and it's not a barrier to us making change. Okay. At the same time, we're going to reduce our cost, and we're going to improve our reliability of our systems as well, because of that whole DevOps process that we'll implement is supported from the containerization platform all the way through to the rest of our products as well. And then, of course, we all know about compliance. So HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, all of this stuff. We know that it is a pain, but it's one of those necessary evils that we all have to comply with. So whatever industry you're in, you might even have more stringent things. I know in the aerospace industry, there was a ton of regulation. And in fact, there were whole entire systems that were created just to check compliance of the stuff that people are doing, of the data, just checking compliance. And so that's a real thing. And you have to get control of your processes. You have to get control of your data and how that data is being treated. And there's no better way to do it than in a system where you can see what's happening, you can control what's happening, and you can, make the changes as quickly as you need to stay compliant. And all of this results in an improved customer experience. And that's our goal, really. We're not just collecting data to be collecting data. We're collecting data so that we can provide a better experience for our customer. So all the steps that we do is to support that end goal.
And I think, Jay, that's the key piece there, right? It's the improved customer experience. And kind of thinking through everything, to improve that, we've got to know, and this is going to be different per industry, it's going to be different for every organization, which is how are these conversations being had or would like to be had with customers, and is it consistent? And you've got all this data, how is that data being pulled together as opposed to being looked at as very disparate, sort of siloed ways to interact with a customer, as opposed to just being a different mechanism, but still the same conversation. But then also going through and thinking about, okay, what's going to be the most important? What do we currently have, let's say, from an infrastructure and architecture standpoint? Because to be able to build out this blueprint, we got to understand what systems need to be connected and why, and what data is where. Does it need to be transformed? How does one thing talk to another? And it really, what is happening is the data is there, or you want to be able to collect more data, and you got to bring it all together, and it needs to be analyzed and looked at and used cohesively so that again, going back to the improved customer experience, that can be provided. And this, Jay, we've talked about this. This really does apply to a lot of different industries. We've talked about, for instance, for customer service, where let's say, for instance, you have internet and cable through a provider. So for instance, I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, I have AT&T. Let's say, for instance, there was an outage. Mm-hmm. Well, what if they knew that and then they alerted me ahead of time about when something was going to be, what was the cause, and kept things up to date so I didn't have to call in. Mm-hmm. On the same side, let's say, for instance, I did call in and they knew about an outage, and they could say, hey, Mr. Minthorn, are you calling about an outage to your cable or to your internet?
Absolutely.
And I could say yes. They say, okay, and then they could give me an update and things like that, and they would already know, and they start to become preemptive and proactive. Mm-hmm. But then you look at something like travel. We've written a blog post about this, where, like you mentioned, airline industries. There's a lot of different airlines, And as we all know, if you've traveled enough, different airlines, they want you to be with different hotel chains, and they might have cruise partners or car rental partners, or there's different vacation packages, all those sorts of things, and they're going to mail you stuff. There's conversations they have on the little screens on the plane or in their app, or when you're actually sitting in a lounge, or a lot of different channels there. But again, it's always about bringing that back together, and how do you then have those conversations with your different customers. So I want to, Jade, kind of start to wrap things up before we get into any of the Q&A. Is why is it so important? Again, circling back to the importance of building an omni-channel strategy and making sure that not only understanding that strategy, but things from a technology standpoint are done well, and how does this apply to other industries? And we're going to show some, but want to have you talk to that as we start to wrap up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these industries, for example, I'm most familiar with the transportation industry, and just as you were giving that example there, I remember before when there was a delay in the flight, you'd go to the gate and to find out that the flight was delayed. But now you get a text message as soon as they know that the flight's delayed. That way you can adjust your travel plans and such to accommodate the change of the flight schedule. But you'll find those examples in every single industry. In that client that you're talking to, it's going to be different how you interact with them based on your industry. But the thing that's common is that all the customers want to be treated as an individual. They don't want to be treated as an unknown customer X or customer demographic group, whatever, baby boomers, Gen Xers, they're not categorized like that. They don't categorize themselves like that in those broad ways. Hey, I'm Jade, I like computers and I like flying to warm places. If you know that, you're not gonna, advertise to me, let's go to Norway for vacation. It's you got to know who I am. And that's how customers want to do it, whether they're in retail, transportation, or whatever they want to do it. Now, there's different regulations, of course, with every industry, like the healthcare industry, what you can share and what you can collect about certain clients, and you must adhere to that. But the bottom line is the same. You gotta know your customer, and you gotta have a way to communicate with them in a consistent way. So really just to kind of summarize here in terms of, what we get for what we do. If we collect and we share that data, we get a holistic view of our customer. We know who they are. We know how to respond to them. We know how to anticipate their needs. And the only way we're going to do that is to know who they are. And in order for us to help make those types of decisions, those kind of moves, is we've got to learn from our data. We just can't get the data, compile it into a spreadsheet report, and that's the end of it. No, we have to discover what are the patterns within that data. We need to bounce it against what we see in other groups of data that we collect. And then we need to make some insight into that, and there are things like machine learning and AI that can help to discover those patterns. But before you can do that, you've got to get a control of your data. You got to get control of that process of gathering the data, moving it to the right places, and then taking that action on it with these other tools. And then the last thing we want to do, once we get that data, once we have a clear sight of our customer, once we have, kind of discovered their behavioral patterns and kind of able to now predict what it is that we think that customer is going to do or what they might want to do. So then we can start to tailor communications to that customer specific to what they're doing. Like last week, my family and I went camping, and we went like 5 different times into Academy and bought different stuff that we forgot. But what if, I went into Academy the first time and we bought some canteens, and the next time we bought some of this, and they said, oh, this person must be going camping and they must be forgetting some stuff. Why don't we go ahead and send them an email, say, hey, make sure you pick these up, these 5 items. That would have been great. Instead, we kept making all these trips to Academy for things I forgot. But those are the types of things you can start to do when you can predict a person's behavior based on the patterns that you see in the data.
Well, perfect. Really want to thank everybody for joining today. And thank you to Red Hat with helping sponsor this. Definitely, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on Instagram. We post a lot of content, not only jointly with Red Hat, but also what are we seeing and how have we worked with customers and things that we're seeing. And obviously always visit our website, reach out to us. Would love to continue the conversation with you and see what you're doing and how does that fit in with our experience and what we've seen in working with customers. So again, really appreciate everybody joining today. And we've got just under 10 minutes, so I want to open up to Q&A. What I'm going to do is on the go-to little app that should be on your screen, you should be able to see a chat. Go ahead and type your question in there. We will read that out loud, and then Jade will answer, and then we'll just go through those here for the next little bit. No questions yet. Don't be shy. We're definitely here to answer questions.
And Josh, as we're waiting on some questions to come in, I just want to make a remark. There are some social groups that I'm a part of. They were groups that we met in person before the quarantine era, and even small little community groups like that had to find ways how they can now shift from having that face-to-face interaction to communicating with their members. And we see what the words that now came like Zoom fatigue and all these different things where people are experiencing different things based on technologies that they didn't have to use before. But we have to be preemptive about this. We know that things are changing. We know that the way that customers are shopping is going to change, not just because of the pandemic, but because of time constraints, the choice, just having choice, so people are changing. And if they didn't change before, I think now they've discovered that they can change. Like I know some stores, they've had online shopping for a long time, but I never went to their online store. I always went into the store. And then when they had their stores open, then I went to online shopping. I said, hey, you know what? Probably I won't go back to the store. I'll probably go online, because I can save myself a trip. But we have to anticipate that things like that are going to happen, and we have to put services and we have to put things in place so that we can accommodate those customers.
So that's interesting, Jade. You mentioned that you go shopping physically in a store, and now with everything going on, you started to go online, and now thought to yourself, well, I probably won't go online in the future, or probably wouldn't go to brick and mortar, probably just use online. What do you think changed about that? Because before you were only going brick and mortar, and now you kind of, in a way, somewhat forced to go online, and you decided that you probably won't go back. What do you think was holding you back from going to online, and what do you think now is the reason why you wouldn't go in person?
Well, I think this particular retailer really focused on their retail locations, and they were all their advertising was to try to push you to come into the store. And I think that during the pandemic, they actually changed that, because they couldn't have the customers come into the store. So now they shifted over to pushing people to their online presence. And I know that shift was noticeable, right? It was very noticeable because I never noticed online prior to that. I never even thought about it. And I'm an online shopper. I do Amazon all the time, but this particular retailer, I didn't even realize that they had an online presence. So when they started shifting, I immediately shifted over to online, and everything was fine. They didn't lose me as a customer. They just shifted me over to their online stuff. And I would have to say that, this wasn't an intentional omni-channel strategy on their part. This was something that happened as a result of, current events. But, we get ahead of that now. We have the opportunity to get ahead of that. And whatever pandemic or whatever situation happens in the future, we should be able to stay in contact with our customers. We should be able to let them know that, hey, here's the change that's happening. We're still good, we're still here for you. But we've got to be able to have those foundational pieces in place in order to do that.
And I think that's what you highlight there, Jade, is it may be that, especially with that particular retailer, their strategy was the in-store experience. And maybe that was a way to have customers buy other things that maybe they weren't looking for. Maybe again, they want to set themselves apart based on that personal touch of when you walk in the store and somebody helping you. And being knowledgeable. And so they were primarily going through there. Now, obviously, they've switched, and now they need to be able to make that switch. Now they maybe a little bit more. They're still omni-channel like they were before, but maybe it was 80% print and get people in the store. And now that's got to change. And what I think is important about that is that there's that flexibility in that there might be multiple channels, and you want to be able to, whatever from an organizational standpoint, whatever that strategic initiative is, where are you going to direct customers? Where do you want them to purchase? What channels do you want them to purchase? And the only way that you're going to be able to really influence that and understand what's effective and be able to measure the effectiveness is through having an omni-channel strategy and grabbing and integrating and grabbing all of this data and putting it together, because otherwise, in a way, I would say that an organization would be flying blind because they're not leveraging the data together. Again, as we've talked about, coalescing it together to really get the insights to be able to one, either predict or at least have and understand what consumer behavior is, and that when people shop in different channels, for instance, Nordstrom, what's going to be the impact? Do they start to go more? Do they start to spend more each time, and things like that? And that's a key part of it too. It's not just where do you direct, but also being able to then measure and understand where do you want to direct customers and what demographic, so that they end up at the end of the day spending more. And I think that's important as well.